We have a delegation of Federation bigwigs visiting us, diplomats planning on going through the wormhole to see what services they can provide on the other side. Or, more likely, everybody who knows them got sick of their incessant squawking and thought 70,000 light-years away was the best place for them. That would certainly explain why Sisko's foisted the job of handling them onto Bashir. At least one of them is capable of taking care of herself, though not without making a fuss in her own way. It's Lwaxana Troy, mother of TNG's favourite half-betazoid, and she's been robbed. Quark says that falls under lost personal items and points out the tiny sign saying he's not liable, but Lwaxana's having none of that. Odo turns up before she gets proper violent and clocks her as a telepath. Simple solution then, he says, have a quick brain scan around you and see if anybody's feeling guilty. The result's negative, but apparently that doesn't work on Ferengi, so it's not conclusive. To be fair to Odo, he sticks up for Quark, sort of, by saying such a small theft is an inefficient way of taking money from people. Instead, he grabs hold of an unknown alien and, after a search, we discover they're the thief. Makes sense, he says, as their species shares ancestry with Ferengi, so have similar anti-telepathy abilities. We could have a discussion on species profiling there, I suppose, but it's not our legal system. The stolen goods are returned, and Odo drags the culprit away, leaving Lwaxana veritably swooning over her saviour. Up in Ops, O'Brien's having a fight with the computer. Cardigans build their computers to stop you from doing something obviously stupid, which is probably why their ships don't blow up as much as Starfleet ones, but O'Brien's used to doing things how he wants and doesn't care for the restrictions. He thinks he can rebuild it in just a short couple of years, so I guess we'll check back in Season 3. If somebody could remind me in the Season 2 summary comments, that'd be handy. Cheers. Anywho, Bashir's decided Sisko should have a taste of his own medicine and has brought the ambassadors up to Ops, saying they insisted on seeing it. The prophets are on Sisko's side, though, as their whining is interrupted by an unscheduled arrival through the wormhole. It's uncrewed from the looks of things, possibly a probe, but isn't sending out any signals. It does appear to have a fairly sophisticated computer aboard, though, so maybe that'll give us some answers. Dax wants to immediately bring it in for study, but this isn't Voyager, so Sisko insists on it staying outside until we know it's safe. As O'Brien tries to make our computer talk to whatever's on the Maybe probe, Sisko realizes this is a great reason to get rid of the ambassadors. They want to hang around as this might be a first contact situation, but he says he'll keep them informed and suggests the best place to observe proceedings is from the docking ring. I'm sure it's just coincidence that this would place them far, far away from Ops. Lwaxana's on the hunt. Odo might know how to deal with whatever scum the universe throws at him, but in this particular encounter he's entirely outclassed. She's as subtle and reserved as Tom Paris with a case of Ponfar, and Odo hasn't got a clue how to deal with it. So much so that he pretends to hear a call for him and departs, but she won't take fleeing in fear for an answer. As Odo was escaping to Ops, let's go there ourselves to see how this Maybe probe is working out. In a reversal of fortunes, the computer is now doing just what O'Brien wants it to. Probably means it'll all go down the pan shortly, but we'll let him have his little wins. Odo's arrived and talks to Sisko. For his part, Sisko thinks he should consider the offer. Nothing wrong with a little romance, he says, though I think that definition might be stretching the reality. Odo's not up for it in either sense of the term, and has a little rant. He thinks courting rituals are pointless busywork and views relationships in much the same way. That's why he wants Sisko to sort her out for him. Beating off Odo's admirers isn't in Sisko's job description, and he makes it very clear that Odo will have to sort this himself, tactfully. She may be a sex pest, but she's also an ambassador. We've had a decent look at the Maybe probe and have identified the metal it's made from. That's according to the Bajoran woman, who's probably going to be important, as this is her second scene. Our computer's also finished analysing its counterpart, and the result is decidedly unprobe-like. A computer powerful enough to run a large starship, but none of the sensors or communications gubbins you'd expect, and no data on who launched it. It's as much a mystery as Lwaxana is to Odo. She's managed to corner him again despite his caution, and half invites, half orders him on a picnic in a holosuite. He finds a reason to be in a docking pylon instead and tries to scarp her, only for her to accompany him. As he's likely wondering how this could get any worse, the universe obliges and the lift they're in breaks down. Oh dear, and the teleporters aren't working either, and guess they'll have to wait it out together. There's good news and bad news. The good news is the computer says everything on the lift is working. The bad news is the lift's still not working. Same thing with the teleporter. I'll admit my engineering skills are somewhat limited, but I'm pretty sure one of the basic principles is, if something stops working, you look at the last thing that changed first. That'd be our computer talking to the NOT probe, but I guess we're only halfway through the episode, so let's give them a chance. Anywho, this is clearly not the result Odo wanted, and his desire to wait in peace isn't going to happen either. By the time she's halfway through one of her exploits with the Enterprise crew, Odo's already giving serious thought to escape, despite being told Cardigan lift shafts have exposed electrical contacts. Maybe he's wondering if he could shapeshift into something non-conductive. At least Odo's only having to deal with one of the ambassadors. Bashir's still trying to herd the other three, and it's wearing him down. Sisko tells him it's part of the job, and he went through similar assignments. Until he twatted one of them anyway, though he doesn't recommend that course of action. It sounds like he only got away with it because the guest in question absolutely deserved it, and nobody wanted to make things official. Bashir goes off, probably to think of a way he can avoid such duties in the future, while O'Brien talks to Sisko. He's noticed a few odd things with our computer, mostly to do with the fact that it's actually working how he wants it to, though still hasn't fixed the lift. And he thinks the voice has changed slightly too, or more accurately, the way it speaks. It's not as brusque or combative as normal. The weirdest one, though, is how, whenever he goes off to do something that doesn't involve the computer, something happens to bring him back to it. And it all started when we linked to the strange NOT probe, the one with the powerful computer in it. What a fascinating coincidence. Odo and Lwaxana are still stuck in a lift. The numbers changed from the one we were told earlier, but I don't think that's important, so let's ignore it for now. What is important is trying to figure out how to sort our little computer problem. Dax is wondering if we're dealing with a life form rather than something more nefarious. There's a debate over the ability to directly talk to it, and one that could be solved by just asking, it seems to me, but nobody thinks of it. Regardless, it's screwing up our space station, whether intentionally or not. O'Brien thinks we might be able to just squirt it back into the NOT probe, which is something we should probably try soon, as Sisko's realised Odo turning back into a liquid without a container might not be healthy for him. And that outcome is increasingly likely. Attempts to return whatever data we gathered from the NOT probe result in first a failure and then a loss of power. Maybe it likes having room to stretch its electric legs. Confinement is perhaps today's theme then, as Odo and Lwaxana are still in their lift, though we haven't clarified whether it's number 4 or number 7. Lwaxana's run out of things to say, it seems, or perhaps thinks Odo is sufficiently softened up by her barrage to be more open. It works to an extent, and we learn a few new things about him, such as his hair, or the bit of him mimicking hair, is styled after the scientist who studied him after he was found. That leads us to a quick glimpse of his early life in a lab and some compassion from Lwaxana, all of which halts when Odo takes a turn for the worse. He needs to regenerate as a liquid every 16 hours, and that clock is very nearly out of time. Just as well, then, that O'Brien has another idea for how to fix this. Whatever's in the computer won't transfer itself out, but he thinks we can stick it on futuristic USB drives instead. Part of the plan seems to be keeping the computer occupied, so they load it up with a series of pointless busywork tasks while our conspicuous new crew member from earlier starts removing bits of tech. I hope she's got life insurance. I'm not sure if it's the addition of more tasks or the removal of those USB rods, but someone on the writing team is a fan of 2001: A Space Odyssey, as our computer is turning decidedly HAL 9000 and slowing down. Some bits go kaboom, and surprisingly don't kill the random Bajoran who's had lines this episode. That doesn't mean we're all out of danger though, as we've got some problems elsewhere. A fire breaks out in a corridor where Bashir and the ambassadors are trapped, and that's going to mean a load of paperwork for Sisko if we don't stop it. Sisko and Kira pop down there personally to try and cut through the door, sealing Bashir and the ambassadors in. Cardigans build their stuff to last though, and the core is made from Beskar steel or some shit. They're not getting through it anytime soon, so it's up to O'Brien to get those sprinklers working, something currently offline due to the computer malarkey. He and Dax have started referring to whatever's in the computer as an it, now assuming it's alive. Being shoved back in the NOT probe isn't anybody's idea of fun, so it's hardly surprising they're being met with resistance. Time for a different approach then. If it enjoys being here and around activity, we just need to find a way of making that happen without screwing everything up in the process. And O'Brien thinks creating a place for it to live in our own system is the answer. A place to be is Odo's problem too. He's not able to hold back his change for much longer, but doesn't want to revert in front of Lwaxana. It's a matter of privacy and trust, and one that she overcomes by removing her wig and showing him that she changes who she is for others too. Convinced by the display, he relents and is held in her skirt while he rests. As Sisko and Kira are still trying to cut through that door, O'Brien's finished making an electronic house with our random Bajoran, who now looks like she's going to beat the odds and survive the whole episode. Our computer tenant is told to look at what's been built so it understands, and makes no attempt to stop things when it's transferred to its new home. A return of power means Sisko can use the manual door override, which, as I've said previously on the Voyager reviews, doesn't make it very bloody manual, does it? The ruined corridor they find makes Kira assume everybody's carked it, only to be proven wrong when Bashir pops out of a side hatch with the ambassadors, all of whom greatly compliment him. He seems pleased by this turn of events, probably because he hasn't realised that this means all future ambassadors will ask for him specifically. Sucks to be him. And the lift, whose number we're still not sure of, has finally arrived back at the promenade. We'll assume they redirected it from its original destination of a docking pylon when the power came back on. Odo thanks Lwaxana in his own way, and she leaves, but not without a threat to return. Odo doesn't seem to mind. Sisko returns to Ops, and Dax tells him that instead of getting rid of our guest, we've adopted it. Explaining why one of the most important outposts in the sector now has an unknown AI living in the computer is going to be a tough one to explain to Starfleet Command, so we'll leave Sisko to decide what fiction he's going to put in his official report until the next adventure. Hot on the heels of the last summary's little poke at Odo, we get even more nuggets in this one. I don't eat. This is not a real mouth. It's an approximation of one. I do not have an esophagus or a stomach or a digestive system. More questions abound then. Does he have vocal cords and lungs to power them? We certainly hear him sigh enough in this one, but that could be yet another affectation. Is he shaping his mouth to form sounds, or is that just more performance, while the words are projected fully formed from whatever part of him is creating them? The hair, he says, isn't made from follicles. Is that because he doesn't know how, or because it would then take on the activities of hair, such as growth? If one falls out, how does that affect him? Questions on questions on questions, but no answers. And that's before we ask about the comm badge. We've got plenty of other stuff to chew on though, and most of it about Odo and his reluctance to be who he is around others. Again, there's that parallel with masking I mentioned in the last video, but also partly an aversion to showing perceived weakness, perhaps. Or maybe it's more simple, maybe he doesn't want to transform to his natural state in front of others because that's what he had to do around the scientists who observed him. Is this his way of reclaiming himself, perhaps, to have a thing that is wholly his? I suspect it's a stew of multiple things, not least of which the shame that he told Lwaxana he didn't feel. Speaking of which, Lwaxana herself shows depth here. She has a reputation for being loud and conspicuous, abrasively so for many. She says she has never cared to be ordinary, but how much of that is her and how much what's expected of a daughter of the Fifth House, holder of the sacred chalice of Rix, heir to the holy rings of Beta Z? Was removing her hair entirely for him, or perhaps a little bit for herself as well? You'll note we've not said much about the plot, and that's because it only really exists as an excuse to make the sideshow of Odo and Lwaxana happen. I don't say that as an insult, as it did precisely what it was there for. We needed a reason for people to be trapped without rescue or contact, and this provided it while being entertaining enough in its own right. Sometimes the best thing a plot can do is get out of the way so we can see the people behind it, and this is a pretty good example of how that works in practice. End of episode.
I don't want to sound like I'm being deliberately negative.
Oh, here we go.
But I don't think dressing up your turd as another detainee is going to work.
Why not?
Because they'll have kept a track of prisoner numbers.
They could get it wrong.
And there are cameras in here.
That can be faked.
And the room stinks of dog turd.
That's Quark's cologne.
Besides which, where did you even get the glasses and mustache?
Same place I got the Monopoly set we've been using to pass the time.
Oh my god, not again.
Why do you think there were so many brown properties? Oof.